I sit on the back veranda holding a coffee and staring at my backyard. It's a small rental in one of those inner north suburbs where people like me get around on bikes and get fed by Ubers and only get out their Subaru Outbacks on weekends to go outback. It's October and the grass is long and damp. There's a rosemary bush that's almost in the corner but not quite, companion planted with leggy, hard-working succulents nicked from nearby nature strips, and my highly successful parsley bush. I stare at my backyard. I want to make a garden. I'll grow all the food I need to feed myself and share what's left with friends and neighbours. I definitely can. Look at my highly successful parsley bush. I down my coffee and go binge watch some Costa. I'm ready. I want the grass gone now. I grab a shovel and start ripping it up. I'm sweaty and inspired and my coffee has kicked in. I'll grow heirloom breeds of natives. I'll teach people how to cook and keep the species going. I'll grow plants that flower for insects and birds. Habitat, biodiversity, that's what this place needs. I've pulled up a metre of grass now, and a chunk mound is forming against the fence. They'll come to sit and escape, and we'll have parties and dinners in the backyard, and they'll learn and they'll share and they'll be inspired and they'll tell their friends who'll tell their friends. I'll just pull down the back fence and let them all in. I'll dig some swales to slow runoff and get compost to feed the soil and plant perennials with strong roots to restore nutrients and draw down carbon. 3 metres of grass excavated now, plus my grass chunk pile and a ditch for a swale and a large hole in the back fence. But now I'm bored of digging, and so it's time to plant. And so I go to the local nursery. It's nice in there, and the nurseryman looks like a grubby farmer, Timothy Chalamet. So I choose too many seedlings, and I boot my little card in the money machine, and I go home and I plant them all, and then I wait, and it rains, and things grow, and I'm excited. It's December now, and things are really cranky. The weeds are doing particularly well, but the early vegetables can be harvested, so I'm excited. I invite people to come over and look, and I see people peeking through the gap in the back fence, so I invite them in too, and they stay and they chat, and we eat, and they tell me stories about their own gardens and their own lives. And then January comes and it's drier and hotter. And the spring was so wet that I'd forgotten watering is my job too. I go outback in my outback and the finger line dies and the tomato plants are looking sad and my housemates are worried because I'm stressed and there are rats in the compost and I've spent all my money on seedlings and moments with Timothy Chalamet. And it's not just the finger lime and the tomatoes, but everything begins to turn dull and wilt and shrivel and the symbolism feels annoyingly cliche. And I'm disappointed and embarrassed, so I don't try to salvage any of it. And then our landlord gives us notice. We've got 3 months before they turn the block into 3 houses. There's barely enough time to get plants from new seeds, so I don't bother. A neighbour walks past and pokes her head through the gap in the fence. She sees me sitting among my dying tomatoes. I've never noticed her before. She looks like she's seen some shit and knows some shit. And I want to know everything, so I ask her who she is and where she lives, but she doesn't reply. But she does come into the garden, and she sits with me. We just sit, and we watch, and we listen. We can hear birds a few houses down. I realise how loud the crickets are now. I'd be annoyed if that same noise was coming from the fridge, but it's coming from nature, so we listen. The shadow of the house moves slowly across the garden. The day darkens, the sound change. We stay there for ages. As we sit, and we watch, and we listen. She stays, and then we get to work. Slowly over days and over weeks, the plants that die we compost, the plants that remain we water and tend to. New plants grow and old plants flower, while my neighbour tells me stories. Stories about the skies, about the earth and about the waters, about her history and about our history too, of how some of her ancestors were from here, while some of them travelled to be here. Sometimes the friends and neighbours join us, sometimes they don't. Some housemates leave because they're confused and upset with me for the mess and the rats and for spending months in the backyard with our neighbour. While we work, I watch the garden. I can't tell anymore if I've changed it for the better and I can't really see where it's going. My neighbour says that change isn't always sudden and it isn't always visible. It isn't always you who creates it either, and you don't always need to know where it's going. She instead asks what I've noticed change around me. We watch as the weather moves across the sky from the west to the east today, and I said I hadn't noticed this before. I kind of imagined the weather just happened above me, not really coming from anywhere or going anywhere. I only just noticed too that the stars moved from the east to the west. I tell her this. I read that the average distance between stars is 30 million kilometres. That huge, dark, unknown, expanding space between them freaks me out, so I tell her this too. My neighbour then says that the best things happen in the dark, unknown space. In the dark and around the edges, that's where hope comes from. She tells me that her stories come from the dark space between the stars too, so the more space the better. Stories going back to time immemorial. I nod, but I know that she knows that I don't know what immemorial means, so she adds deep time, all time. And it's just these stories that remain from there, stories that will long outlive us too. This still overwhelms me, makes me feel insignificant, makes my garden feel irrelevant. That's the best part, she says. that connection to the past and to the future and to everything in the universe. You can either see it as the insignificance of you or the significance of everything. So either none of it matters or all of it does. 3 months pass. Eventually my landlord comes and tells us we have to get out of the backyard so they can start the subdivision. We both climb up through the gap I made in the fence and my neighbour thanks me for listening. I'm guilty that she's grateful, but I smile and say thank you too. I go to my new house and I sit on the back veranda, but I don't dig any holes yet or break down any fences. Not yet, for now. I just sit and I watch and I listen.